see. Are we there? We are there. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Awesome. I am your host, of course, Jim Kellner, and certified hypnotherapist, stage hypnotist, all-around swell fella. Just ask my mom. All right. So my guest today, everybody, this is really exciting. Would you like to transform your life? We have a gentleman on today that's going to help you to do that. His name is Chris M Sprague. Chris is an international transformation empowerment ambassador. He's a keynote speaker, and I really think we get a lot out of this. He wants to talk today about 0 point, and I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. How you doing today, Chris?
Awesome, Jim. Awesome has got to be the word for today. It could be epically awesome, but I think that's a little bit overboard, so we'll just go with awesome.
Perfect. Hey, thanks for joining us today. So just, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Let people know a little bit more than what I just said.
Sure. It's funny. In prep for the show, we were talking. I have to thank you for a compliment. You said I had an interesting life, and I appreciate you recognizing that from what's out there. It's to me, and what people tell me the most interesting thing is that, I've had this kind of windy path. I started off as an actor, an entertainer, and a future professional bowler. Yes, 16-pound, three holes in a ball down the lane, 10 pins. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I always have to specify because I've got some people who in India who follow me, and they're always like, they always say to me, Chris, when we hear bowler, we think of cricket, and we think of and I'm like, yeah, and I haven't played it, but it's a cool game. So anyway, started off life. Was acting since I was 5 years old. I've been on and off the stage, doing behind the scenes, in front of the camera, behind the camera stuff over 40 years. As I progressed through high school, I realized that media, radio, television, and film, or bowling was my life's calling, and what I was going to do. I know it gets a lot of laughs, but hey, when you grow up in a small town and you're overweight, and it's kind of at that point, well, anyway, I could go on a whole nother tangent, but the short version is this. When I got out of high school, I was DJing, I was entertaining, and I was having a great time. But it didn't pay the bills. And the funny part is now people hear and they see people on the radio, they think of Howard Stern and think of the personalities that get big, lucrative contracts. And it's like back in the 80s, it wasn't that way. So I had to do something better to pay the bills. I took a 15-year detour into information technology. Yeah, I know, it's an actor on stage and then sits behind a desk. What I tell people is this: there's one common thread, and we'll talk about it later, and that's the creativity. And we'll talk about why that's key to 0 point later on. But after 15 years going through a couple layoffs in the IT realm, I ended up joining the John Maxwell team as a founding partner because I was a leader everywhere I went, and I thought I was meant to do leadership coaching. What I didn't realize at that point, because I didn't know my 0 point and didn't understand what I was meant to do, was that I was meant to motivate, inspire, empower, and transform people's lives. And then if they're meant to be a leader, then teach them good leadership principles. So that's where, that brings us to kind of mostly up to speed.
Great. Yeah. Oh, I just want to let everybody know also, and let you know, Chris, I am doing some stuff. You'll see me looking away and everything. I am paying attention. I'm also inviting people to live tweet the show if you'd like, at Jim Kellner, at JimKellner. You can live tweet the show. Your questions, comments, concerns, or pictures of pretty girls. Either way, we'll take them. Or unpretty. Sorry, that was, if you're just smart, not just whatever. Anyway, let's move on. All right.
Open mouth, insert foot. That's okay. We all do.
That's okay. It's not live. We'll cut this out, right? Oh, no, it is live. All right. So, and handsome guys, you can feel free to, or ugly guys, tweet your pictures, whatever. No nudity, please. I'm very bashful that way. All right. So you were working with John C. Maxwell organization. That's impressive. That's in fact, I'm just reading or listening to one of his books right now. Co-author. I can't remember the name of it right now though. Anyway. Okay.
I would ask you I would continue to rattle through names, but there's 73 of them or 77 by this point, and we can hear all out. So.
So let me see. So how did you actually become the International Transformation and Empowerment Ambassador? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I have to look away for a second because I start to cry. I always have to prepare myself. Well, here's the thing of it. You only achieve something like that through going through a major transformation or major low point in your life. And for people who say that they don't, they just kind of lived high all their life, I challenge them to look back. So a couple years ago, I was, my goal has always been to get back on stage, be a speaker, and do this for a living. And I looked up at God and I said, you know what? I don't have that great story. I was bullied as a kid. I get it. Had a better upbringing than some, worse than others. But when you have a middle of the road, average type of thing, even if you have been bullied and you haven't been, completely destroyed, it kind of doesn't make for a great story. I mean, I had lost weight before, and I went from 300 pounds to 200 pounds, and that was okay in the story. But so I looked up and I said, don't have a great story. Well, little did I know how much humor God actually has. He said, okay, kid, you want a story? I'm going to give you a story. So in the span of less than a year, I had my wife leave me. I lost everything, went through a financial meltdown, lost my mom to cancer, lost a grandmother to an unforeseen stroke. Some of the things that happened during that year was released a book, dedicated it to my now ex-wife, showed her the book with the dedication page, showed her the final proof printed copy, as you get the point here. 3 days later, she looks at me and she says, you know what, if you don't quit this whole author, coach, public speaker thing and get a real job, I'm leaving. So my first response was, what can we do to save it? My second response was, couldn't you have freaking told me 3 days ago before I approved the proof that was dedicated to you? But now it makes for a great story. Fast forward to the middle of the year, and my wife and I had agreed my ex-wife and I had agreed we weren't going to get divorced till the end of the year. Right around our old anniversary, she comes walking in the house and she says, look, I'm going to go ahead and file the papers next week. I said, why? She said, because I had the time, not necessarily a really good reason that I want to hear. So 4 hours later, I called my mom, who was my rock during the whole thing, and her life partner, Art, says to me, Chris, your mom can't get on the phone. I said, why? He said, well, remember the pain she was going through? I said, yeah. He says, it wasn't shingles, it was cancer, and she's going into hospice today. Oh, so the whole point is through going through those really dark times. I mean, I had some very, very dark times. There was times where I had no food in the house. There was times where literally the only food in the house was cat food. And that's a very humbling experience. And there was days where I couldn't get off the couch. There was days where my biggest joy was putting one foot on the floor and going, yes, I put a foot on the floor. What I realized, fast forward towards the end of that year, I realized that my struggles were because I didn't understand my 0 point. And what I realized is there was people also going through the same thing I was going through. In other words, the dark times. So I had to take on the role of empowerment and transformation to at least get people to realize that there was something better on the other side. But empowerment, transformation, inspiration, motivation, the whole 9 yards, that doesn't last, it doesn't work if you don't give people the tools and if you don't give people what to do on the other side. Because I can pump people up all day long. We've been talking now for a while, and I'm running off at the mouth with diarrhea, but that's besides the point. The point is as you can tell, I've got a lot of energy and I can pump people up, but I don't want to do that and then just let them down in the end. So it was kind of a combination of everything. In direct answer to your question, I went through a lot of dark, it was a long explanation to get to this point. I went through a lot of dark times, realized there was other people going through the dark times, realized that if my dark times didn't translate into something positive for other people, they would have meant nothing. And I just couldn't leave that alone. So picked up the mantle of the International Transformation and Empowerment Ambassador. Now, one of the things I do is go around and my goal is to lift people up and then give them the tools on the other end to stay up and to progress and transform their lives.
That's fantastic. And I think that you make such a good point. We're talking about reframing here. And so we're taking a bad situation, we're trying to find the positive in it, and that's what you did. And I think that's, to me, I think that's one of the real keys of success is when you can, figure out, things. I mean, bad stuff happens to all of us. We all have challenges, But being able to see some sort of positivity there, or at least turn it into a positive, and that's what you've done. So congratulations, that's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I'm curious, we'll take a little bit of a detour. Your wife, now, she didn't want you to be a motivational speaker or anything. Was it because financially you just weren't able to handle the financial part right away? Is that what was going on?
There's a couple of reasons, and to keep the answer short, finances were one of them. The business was struggling. When she met me, I was a six-figure plus IT guy. When I was in my second, when I went through my second layoff, I was making mid six figures. We were living in a 3,000 square foot house in the burbs, had no debt except for the house. Everything was great. You go from that situation to, as you know, working with people, and maybe in your own business, when you go through that struggling part, that's a dramatic change. And the thing I didn't do was prepare her for how bad it could be. She believed in me at the beginning. She felt that things would get better, and when they didn't after a certain point, that was the big falling off point. So, the other thing, Jim, is this, and this, I want to, anybody watching this, I'm speaking directly to everybody. If you're in the personal growth industry right now, if you have a spouse that is not in the personal growth industry, before you do one more thing, finish watching us, and then before doing anything else, okay, finish watching the show, then before you do anything else, sit down with your spouse and have a conversation. And here's why. If your spouse isn't in the personal development industry and doesn't get it, eventually you're going to separate and you're going to grow apart, because people in the personal growth and development industry grow in a certain way. People who aren't, don't. And if you want your marriage to last, have the conversation, find the middle ground, so that you can continue to be married. It's like Republicans and Democrats. I don't talk politics, but what I will tell you is this: I've known a lot of very successful couples who one is a Republican and one is a Democrat, and that's because even though they speak completely different language, they figured out that middle ground, that they speak that language of love, they speak together. Mm-hmm. Everybody I know in the personal growth and development industry, except for John C. Maxwell, has been divorced at least once. And if you talk to all of them down the line, they were with somebody before they got in the industry. That person didn't really understand what was going to happen, the challenges, the changes, everything they were going to go through. And they never had the conversation. So they split, they got divorced, and then they found somebody inside the industry to live the rest of their life with. So the biggest thing that I would say, the biggest mistake I made, was not going and having that conversation with my now ex-wife. So if that's one thing you learned, that's the only thing you learned from today. Other than I can talk a lot. Learn that from today.
That is so important. I mean, what you're saying, it really is, because, personally, well, so a couple of things is, if you're going to go after your dream, you may have to take several steps back, and what Chris is talking about. I mean, we're talking going from a lot of money to barely enough to get by sometimes, if you really want to do that. And that's got to be, you got to be willing to make that kind of a sacrifice if you want to get somewhere. And that's, I really like the idea of, you've got to prove to success that you're worthy of success. And so by going through those challenges, you're kind of proving yourself to the universe or whatever. The other thing is too, is I remember it's funny you talk about this personal growth thing, because I remember I met a woman a while back, and we were talking about stuff, and she had basically zero goals. And I was like, no goals? What do you, nothing. And it was a challenge for me to really kind of maintain any kind of a relationship there, because somebody that's in this industry, you're always kind of pushing yourself. You want to get to the next level, and you want to, and it's hard to relate to her, to be honest with you. It really was.
Yeah, and that's and that's where I say it's something where, if you're married, that's why you have the conversation, because then you figure out that middle ground. You figure out where you can talk and where you can come together. And you might even figure out, before my ex-wife and I did, maybe it isn't right for you to come together. Maybe you had that conversation and you go, you know what? if this is really the way you're going and this is really the way I'm going, let's find other people that are going in our direction.
Right.
So, you know, you can save yourself a lot of time, heartache, and, you know, and challenge that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody, just want to remind you, you're watching Exploring Awesome with Chris M Sprague today. He is the International Transformation and Empowerment Ambassador. We're talking today about finding your 0 point and why that might be helpful. You're welcome to live tweet the show at Jim Kellner on Twitter, at Jim, Kellner. Love to get your questions, comments, concerns, and I'll leave it at that. And so, Chris, tell me, why is it important to understand how you're wired? Why is that really a key to success or happiness or whatever?
Yeah, because if you don't, the short version is, and I'll tell a quick story to illustrate the point. The short version is, if you don't, you're going to live in a fog and you might end up going down the wrong path your entire life. It's kind of like not being able to read a map. I was hiking with a good friend once, and they didn't read the map right, and I kept saying, we have to go right, and they said, no, it's left, and so we ended up going left, and went about 3 miles out of our way, and just barely made it to base camp before it got dark and got set up. So the whole point, and here's a quick story. So you remember at the beginning when I told you about my journey, I said, you know, I joined John Maxwell as a founding partner, his coaching, teaching, public speaking certification program, because I thought I was meant to teach people leadership. What I didn't realize is that what had happened to me over my life is the world had masked over my wiring, and the world had kind of taught me that I was meant to teach people leadership, and it wasn't for a good reason. It was actually for a bad reason. I was bullied when I was a kid, and as I left that bullying environment, what it had taught me was that if I was number one, if I was the big dog, if I was the leader, then nobody would make fun of me, nobody would, and I'm going to crack a smile here because people who are listening going, you're stupid ass. This is, you know, it's exactly the opposite. It's like, yeah, you're right. I was about to get to that part of the story. But my brain had said to me, hey, if you're the leader, people aren't going to make fun of you. They aren't going to bully you. You're going to be in complete control. And what I didn't realize by the time, you know, I had joined John was the fact that it had become, I'd been walking around in such a fog that I had taken that as the truth. I had taken, even though everything I'm watching on television says exactly the opposite, even though there's CEOs who have lost their job because some minion in a factory somewhere screwed up once and they had to take the blame for it, my brain didn't put the two together. And what had happened was, since I tried to push so hard down that leadership path, my business struggled, my wife left, and that's what led to all my other struggles. If I'd have realized earlier that what I was wired to do was do what you and I are doing right now, which is motivate, inspire, empower, transform people's lives, then teach them leadership. Or like my other business, video content agency, to help people do great videos on the web. If I'd have realized all of this stuff earlier, things would have come a lot easier, they would come a lot quicker, and I wouldn't have had to go through so much pain. Wouldn't have had to go through so much pain in my life.
So when you talk about wired, the way you're wired, are you really talking about finding what your purpose is? Is that what you're saying?
It goes deeper than that. The reason that I call it finding your 0 point is because just like 0 changed the face of mathematics. We had 1 before, but until you got 0, you couldn't do a lot of the complex calculations that we can do today because of 0. And let's face it, we wouldn't have the binary system. We wouldn't have 1s and 0s without 0. So just like that 0 changed the face of mathematics, this 0 can change the face of your life. You know what? I need a copy of that. That's good. I need a copy of this little bit. Here, I'll put my own cut.
It was at 19 minutes. It was at 19 minutes. So.
But if you think about it, you know, people talked about purpose. They've talked about passion. They've talked about all this other stuff. And that's really step 1. But step 0 is when you were born, your 0 point, the map that was put inside you, the blueprint that was put inside you, the outline for your life. It's kind of like an index, or, you know, the table of contents for a book. I don't know how many more different analogies I can give, but I'll probably think of more. The point is, once you find that 0 point and that map, and you understand how you're wired, it leads you down the path and allows you to use your strengths more effectively, allows you to hire for your weaknesses, and backfill those with partners, and it allows you to eliminate a lot of the roadblocks you're going to see in life.
So you're saying that your life purpose is really there from day zero, from birth, or conception, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, there is a blueprint that everybody has. Let me give you one quick example. Jim, how tall are you?
6 feet.
6 feet. Okay, so you're 6 feet. I guarantee you that next year you ain't going to be 6'1". And I guarantee you that in 5 years you're not going to be 7 foot tall, because your body has this code that was put inside your DNA that says Jim Kellner is going to grow to be 6 feet tall as a grown male, and that's it. Now you might shrink. It's funny because I know somebody who actually, as they've gotten older, has literally shrunk 3 inches. When I first met them about 10, 12 years ago, they were a head taller than me. Now I'm seeing eye to eye and I'm going, I ain't getting any taller. So shrinking, that's another thing. But if you think about it, if your body is programmed that way, your mind is programmed that way as well. Now, yes, there are things like hypnosis and other things you can do to switch it, to mask over, to do things, just like you can build your muscles and everything. But there's still limits. There's still this framework that you live within. And that's one of the things that a lot of my brethren and sisters in the personal growth and development industry don't like when I say, because they believe I'm limiting people. And it's like, no, look, people can be anything they want to be within how they were wired. And once they figure it out, they live a happier, longer, more successful life. The most dangerous thing in the world is if you take a butterfly and make them think they're going to turn to a dragon. I mean, it just doesn't happen. And too often in our industry, people want to force people into the idea of thinking they can do it. Like, let me give you another real quick example, and we'll get to your next question. You're a stage hypnotist. I'm quite sure you've hypnotized people to quack like a duck at some point, right? I mean, you've had fun with people like that, right?
Yeah.
Did you turn them into a duck?
No.
No. They didn't automatically grow feathers and change to be a duck. They just looked like a duck for a short period of time. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. A lot of people in our industry want people to believe they can be anything they want to be, and then they get these short bursts of success, but then they go back and their wiring pulls them back in. What they were meant to do pulls them back in, and they go through all the challenges again. So while people can, I hardly ever use the word change, people can transform. And here's my definition of the difference between change and transform. You change to be from one thing to another. You transform into what you're always meant to be. So in other words, as I went through my transformation and went back to what I was supposed to be, I really wasn't changing. I was going back to doing what I was supposed to be doing and who I was supposed to be. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. I got to tell you though, I mean, your take on this is almost blasphemous in this industry. I mean, I'm still kind of reeling a little bit with it. And I do think it makes sense, especially the analogy. I mean, I could relate, of course, with the one with the person on stage being a duck, and I can make him be a duck for a little, or pretend to be a duck for a little while, but I can't make him be a duck forever. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, here's another example. I'm quite sure you've had a lot of successful, because I believe, if I understand your background right, other than stage, and I'll say not in a negative way, but other than stage hypnosis, you do hypnotherapy, you do hypnosis to try and help people overcome smoking and overcome other things, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And let's put all the cards on the table. You've had some successes, and I would guess you've had some people who it didn't work for, correct?
How dare you?
Okay.
Absolutely right. And that's really, this is the thing. We always see these different testimonials and things for different products or solutions and things like that. And what you find is that not one thing works for everybody, and there's always going to be people that are successful and people that are not. And so I'm sort of kind of wrapping my head around this idea, and it's kind of resonating a bit.
And thank you. And what I was going to say about I would bet that if you went back and looked at the people who you weren't successful with, and if you could do an MRI, a DNA scan, I would bet that if you dug in and you could actually unravel their code, so to speak, whether it was genetic or brain wiring, that you would find out that they were never meant to undo what you were trying to get them to undo. You know, it's kind of like people who are overweight and who can't lose weight even when they cut calories. Their metabolism just is bad, or there's something where they just can't, they're just, they just can't lose the weight. Or people with addictive personalities that really struggle even after hypnosis and everything else to, to break their addiction. It's nothing you did. It's nothing anybody else did or didn't do right or wrong. It's just they weren't wired that way. People don't want to accept that. It's tough to accept. But
yeah, absolutely.
But there's new brain research out there. In fact, the guy's name, it's funny because I'll give you kind of good SEO, but it's not going to be the right guy. It's going to be the right guy, but not the right name. Meaning, the guy's name's James Fallon. So if you put Jimmy Fallon in here, everybody's going to Google you for something else. But there's a neuroscientist out there, James Fallon, who did all this brain research and did MRIs and EEGs and brain scans of serial killers and of murderers and everything, and found definite patterns. Now, the interesting thing was he was presented with, I think it was a dozen or so brain scans, and he was, basically everybody in there that showed the same typical brain scan was a murderer or psychopath. Okay. Then he was told one of the brain scans was his.
Whoa.
And
oh, I think, wait, was that did they do something on that on Discovery Channel or something?
I think he's been on CSI. I think he was on CSI, and I thought it was fake. And then he was on the Discovery Channel and started talking.
Yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah.
And it's just, it's such a trip. So his wiring, his blueprint is basically that of a psychopath. Not a good thing to find out. But he's been able to turn I'll say the positive pieces of that. Because let's face it, they say politicians are psychopaths. They say a lot of CEOs are psychopaths. But they've taken what normal people would consider the negatives of that personality and figured out how to use it for good to be very successful. I mean, look at Steve Jobs. I mean, people say, people talk about Steve Jobs as he was a tyrant, but he's built what's now is the most valuable company in the entire world, and created a great fan base in the whole 9 yards. So anyway, I'm getting way off the topic. The short point here is that the reason that people in our industry hate hearing this is because it costs them money. Because they build their business by going to people. You can be anything you want to be. Pay me 10 grand and I'll prove it to you. Mm-hmm. And then they're not. And I take a completely different tact, and I say, look, you can be anything you want to be once you figure out how you're wired. And if that means that you're wired to be a ditch digger, or you're wired to be, a cashier at Walmart, that's okay. You just have to redefine your success level and redefine what success means to you. However, if you're a cashier at Walmart now and you find that what you were really meant to be is president of the United States, wouldn't you like to know that? I think it'd be kind of nice. Well, maybe.
I'd like to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Wow, this is fascinating. And folks, if you're listening live, we're going to take a brief break because we're going to cut this up into a couple of different episodes. So I want to thank everybody for watching. Remember, you can always live tweet the show. You can find me at jimkellnerhypnotist.com. And of course, Chris, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, go to chrismsprague.com, CHRIS, M as in Michael, Sprague, SPRAGUE.com. I think because I'm talking, it should be up on the bottom of my lower third, but in case it's not, that's the easiest way. If that's all too hard to remember, you can always look up videocontent.agency, which ends up being, I don't know, just as hard to remember, but some people have trouble with my last name. So anyway, and especially because somebody else has got Chris Sprague, so you got to have the M in there. The M has got to be in there.
I got lucky with just Jim Kellner.
There you go.
You know what? It's really interesting concept. So my guest today, everyone, if you've been listening, you found out that maybe not everybody can be anything they want to be. Now, when I come back in episode 2 with Chris M Sprague, we're gonna find out how to discover, hopefully, what you are capable of, what you might be best at, and how to go after it after that. So I want to thank everybody for listening, And we will be, if you're listening live, of course, we will be right back. If you're not,
Go
anyway,
down in
whatever.
the comment. If you're not, go down in the comments and find the link down below to episode 2. Right, Jim?
Exactly. Yes. All right. Now we're going to restart. Here we go. And